Lieutenant Zira moved silently across the rocky terrain of the planet Voron 6. The twin suns of the alien world were low on the horizon, casting long shadows that danced across the jagged cliffs. She adjusted her visor, scanning the area for the faintest sign of movement. Her mission was clear: capture the human intruder who had been appearing in places no human should survive. Every other scout had failed, but Zira had been chosen because of her skill, her patience, and her precision. The trap she had prepared was elaborate. She had spent weeks setting up the perfect combination of energy fields, laser nets, and motion-sensitive barriers. The path through the narrow canyon had been carefully engineered so that anyone stepping into it would trigger alarms, activating immobilizers and containment fields. Nothing could pass without being detected. Not a creature, not a human, nothing. Zira crouched behind a boulder, her scales reflecting the dim light. She checked her instruments. The sensors hummed softly, waiting to react to any movement. She took a deep breath, calming herself. She had studied humans extensively. In her mind, humans were fragile. Their bodies were weaker than most alien species. Their reflexes slower. Their minds predictable. She had seen enough recordings to know that a human would never survive this trap. Yet there had been something strange about this one, something different. Reports described a human who had appeared in the middle of active battle zones, walked through hazardous terrain, and survived. No one knew how, and now Zira had her chance to finally understand, or end, the human's interference. Far above, in the sky, a small ship descended silently. Its design was simple, almost primitive by alien standards, but efficient. Captain Elias, the human inside, watched the terrain carefully. He did not rush. He never rushed. His training had taught him patience, observation, and awareness. Every step he took was measured, deliberate. Even in the face of danger, he seemed calm, almost serene. Zira's tail flicked nervously. She had anticipated a dramatic entrance, explosions, alarms, maybe even a panicked human trying to escape. Instead, she saw a single figure walking steadily toward the canyon. Her sensors blinked. The traps were set. The laser nets glowed faintly, waiting. The pressure plates were armed. She knew that the first misstep would trigger alarms. And then, it began. Elias stepped onto the first pressure plate. The sensors registered the movement. Red lights flashed on Zira's display. She expected the immobilizer to fire immediately, to hold him in place while the energy nets closed around him. But nothing happened. He moved carefully, stepping again and again onto sensitive plates. The lasers flared briefly but adjusted around him, as if bending to avoid his presence. Zira's heart, or whatever organ most closely resembled one, skipped a beat. This was impossible. She had designed the trap to be flawless. Every sensor, every plate, every beam had been tested. Nothing could pass through unharmed. She pressed a control button to tighten the energy field, but still he moved forward, unscathed. The lasers flickered but never touched him. It was as if the trap was responding to him differently than expected. Zira's mind raced. Could this human be special? Exceptional? She had heard tales of humans with incredible skill and courage, but she had always believed them exaggerated. Now she was forced to reconsider. From her hiding place, she watched his movements. He paused for a moment, kneeling to examine a small crevice in the rock. His fingers traced the surface carefully, and she realized he was not only aware of the obvious dangers, he could sense the hidden ones too. Every instinct he displayed was sharp and precise. He was cautious, but not afraid. The canyon narrowed. Sharp rocks jutted from the walls, and small pits were scattered along the floor. Any alien less experienced than Zira might have panicked. But Elias navigated the terrain effortlessly. He leapt over small gaps, avoided pressure plates she had forgotten to cover, and adjusted his steps to avoid triggering any hidden sensors. Zira's tail twitched. She had been trained to anticipate movements, but she could not predict this. Every human she had studied followed patterns. But Elias moved like he was reading the environment in real time. He reacted faster than any algorithm, any predictive model. It was unsettling. Impossible, she whispered to herself. She adjusted her visor, zooming in to observe him more closely. His breathing was steady, his eyes calm. Even when a section of rock shifted under his weight, threatening to send him tumbling, he adjusted mid-step, landing without a stumble. Zira felt a strange mix of admiration and frustration. Admiration because he was extraordinary. Frustration because her trap, her perfect trap, had failed. The human approached the final section of the canyon. This area was the most dangerous. She had set multiple overlapping traps here, expecting it to be his end. Laser grids crossed in multiple directions. Pressure-sensitive plates lined the floor. Automated turrets were hidden behind the rocks, ready to fire immobilizing bolts. No one, no alien, no creature, could survive this section without triggering at least one alarm. Elias paused briefly, scanning the environment. He crouched, his hands brushing over the floor and the walls, feeling for disturbances. He adjusted his stance and moved forward, deliberately and carefully. The traps responded, lasers flaring in warning, but he continued. Zira's sensors blinked frantically. She had never seen a human interact with a trap this way. Others would have panicked, tried to jump over or run blindly. Elias adapted. He stepped in ways that avoided the beams, shifted his weight to avoid triggering plates, and even used small rocks to redirect a laser briefly. Her heart raced. She had to understand this. She had to know how a human could do what no other being could. Then, just as he reached the center of the deadly grid, a small alarm sounded on Zira's display. One of the minor sensors had been triggered, but Elias reacted instantly. He jumped to the side, landing perfectly, continuing forward. The energy nets adjusted, but still, he moved unharmed. Zira's mind was spinning. She had been trained to think of humans as fragile, but this human was defying every expectation. Every calculation she had made about human limits was wrong. He was more than resilient. He was ingenious, clever, and fearless. Finally, he reached the end of the canyon. The exit was clear, and the trap had failed entirely. Zira exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and awe washing over her. She had expected a human to be caught, maybe even injured. But Elias had walked through unharmed, as if the trap had been a mere obstacle for him to observe and study, not something to fear. Zira stepped out from her hiding place. Her scales reflected the fading sunlight, and she could see Elias looking back at her. He smiled slightly, not in arrogance, but in acknowledgement. He had survived the trap, not because it was flawed, but because he was extraordinary. For the first time, Zira questioned everything she had believed about humans. They were not fragile, they were not predictable, they were something entirely different, adaptive, resourceful, and remarkable. She realized that capturing him would be far more difficult than she had imagined. And perhaps, she thought, the mission had changed. She was no longer just a hunter. She was now a witness to something extraordinary. The canyon was silent except for the hum of the deactivated traps. Elias stood at the exit, calm and composed. Zira approached slowly, her curiosity overcoming her initial caution. She wanted to study him, to understand him. But more than that, she wanted to see what this human would do next. And so, on the jagged rocks of Voron 6, the game began. The human had survived the trap. The alien scout had never faced anything like him before. And in that moment, Zira realized that everything she thought she knew about humans had been wrong. This was no ordinary human. This was something extraordinary. The canyon's narrow exit glowed under the twin suns, and Captain Elias stepped onto the rocky ground, unharmed and calm. Behind him, the trap, perfectly designed and deadly, lay dormant, having failed in its purpose. Lieutenant Zira crouched a short distance away, hidden among the jagged rocks. She watched him closely, her mind racing. He was walking toward her now, confident but cautious, as if he could sense every danger that might be waiting. His movements were smooth, precise, and deliberate. Every step, every glance, seemed intentional. Zira realized that observing him from a distance would not be enough. She needed to get closer. She needed to understand how a human could walk through a trap that no alien could survive. Zira activated a small scout drone. It hovered silently above, transmitting a live feed of Elias's movements. The drone's sensors monitored him, measuring pulse, breathing, and even the subtle tension in his muscles. Every data point suggested something impossible. His body should have reacted differently to the laser fields. His reflexes should have been too slow. Yet here he was, uninjured, untroubled, and steady. Elias paused near a small rock formation, crouching to examine a faint footprint. He touched it lightly, as if reading a story written on the ground. The drone recorded everything. Zira's tail flicked nervously. She had never seen an alien, let alone a human, move with this level of awareness. It was as if the environment spoke to him, and he was listening. She activated the next layer of the trap remotely. Small energy pulses arced across the canyon floor. Ready to immobilize anything that crossed them, she expected the human to stumble, to trigger alarms, to falter. But he didn't. He adjusted mid-step, his body twisting and turning with remarkable precision. The pulses followed his movements, but he remained untouched, almost as if the energy recognized him and stepped aside. Zira's heart raced. She had studied hundreds of humans, analyzing their movements, learning their weaknesses. Every model predicted failure under these conditions, yet this one defied prediction. Suddenly, Elias paused again, crouching low behind a small rock. Zira watched him intently. He seemed to sense something that even her sensors couldn't detect. He pressed his hand to the rock, feeling vibrations, and then shifted slightly to avoid a hidden laser that had been set to activate if any pressure was applied in that exact spot. The alien scout's mind reeled. How could he anticipate a trap that was designed to react instantly? Every calculation she had made about human limits had been wrong. This human was not just clever, he was extraordinary. Zira pressed a control button to activate a set of hidden turrets, expecting them to fire. Tiny mechanical arms emerged from crevices in the rocks, each holding a focused immobilizer. But Elias was ready. He moved in a fluid motion, ducking behind a rock and then leaping over a small gap. The beams followed him, but he timed his movements perfectly, avoiding every shot. It was not brute force that carried him through. It was observation, intuition, and precision. Zira had trained to anticipate every possible movement, yet she could not predict his actions. She realized with growing awe that humans were not weak. They were unpredictable, inventive, and fast learners in ways no algorithm could fully calculate. The canyon narrowed further, twisting like a winding serpent. Sharp rocks jutted from every side. Zira's traps became more complicated, overlapping sensors and laser grids. She was confident that this section would finally stop him. Elias approached slowly, his eyes scanning for subtle cues. A faint shimmer on the rock, the slight vibration in the ground, the faint hum of hidden energy. He crouched low, moving with careful steps. As he advanced, one of the pressure plates tilted slightly under his foot, almost triggering a trap. But he reacted immediately, shifting his weight to avoid activating the mechanism. Zira's mouth opened slightly. She had never seen anything like this. The human's reflexes were not just fast, They were instinctive. Every decision, every movement seemed to be calculated in an instant, yet fluid and natural. He was alive in a way that was different from anything she had known. Suddenly, a misstep caused a small rock to roll down the canyon. It struck the edge of a laser sensor, sending a warning pulse. Zira expected alarms, beams of light, and energy nets to activate, but Elias reacted instantly. He dove sideways, rolling to absorb the impact of the falling rock. The trap's energy fields flared around him, but he emerged untouched, brushing off dust as if nothing had happened. Zira felt a mixture of frustration and admiration. Her perfect trap, designed to capture or neutralize any intruder, had failed. Every expectation she had about humans was being shattered. She activated a secondary set of barriers, hoping to slow him down. A low wall of energy shot up from the canyon floor, accompanied by a series of small, automated turrets designed to block his path. Elias paused briefly, observing the new obstacles. Then, with careful calculation, he jumped, ducked, and rolled, moving with an effortless grace that defied the complexity of the trap. Zira's tail twitched with disbelief. She had underestimated this human entirely. He was not fragile, not slow, not predictable. He was something else entirely, a being capable of reading the world, understanding it instantly, and acting with precision no alien could match. As he reached the canyon's final section, Zira realized the truth. Humans were not weak. They were clever, adaptive, and resilient. They could survive situations that no other species could. This one human had walked through traps designed to stop the strongest aliens, and he had done it unharmed. Elias finally reached the edge of the canyon, standing tall and calm. He looked back briefly, his eyes scanning the area as if inviting Zira to reveal herself. She did, stepping out from her hiding place. Her scales glinted in the sunlight, her posture alert but curious. "Human," she said carefully, her voice carrying the weight of surprise and respect. How are you unharmed?" Elias smiled faintly, calm and polite. "I observe. I adapt. I move carefully. It's not magic. It's attention and awareness." Zira's mind reeled. She had expected fear, panic, perhaps even resistance. Instead, she found confidence, intelligence, and calm. She realized that humans survived because they thought differently, acted differently, and reacted differently. The canyon fell silent, save for the hum of deactivated traps and the distant winds of Voron 6. Zira watched the human, her mission suddenly unclear. She had come to capture him, to prove the superiority of her species. Now she found herself in awe. She wanted to understand him, to learn from him, and perhaps even cooperate. Elias turned to move forward, walking into the open terrain beyond the canyon. Zira followed cautiously, her curiosity stronger than her training. She needed to see how far his abilities extended. Could he survive more than just a trap? Could he navigate a planet full of hazards and danger? As they moved together, Zira realized something important. Humans were not just survivors. They were clever, inventive, and extraordinary. The traps had failed, but the human had succeeded. And in that success, he had shown her a truth she had never considered. Humans were something to respect, to study, and perhaps even to admire. The sun set behind the jagged cliffs, casting long shadows over the canyon floor. Zira and Elias walked side by side, each aware of the other but moving with purpose. She had never met a human like this, and she knew that the journey ahead would test both of them in ways she could not yet imagine. The trap had been activated. The human had walked through it unharmed. And for the first time, Zira understood that survival was not just about strength. It was about intelligence, awareness, and the courage to face the impossible. And in that understanding, the game truly began. The rocky terrain of Voron 6 stretched endlessly ahead, jagged cliffs rising on either side, sharp ridges cutting across the horizon. The air was thin, crisp, and tinged with a faint metallic scent. Lieutenant Zira followed Captain Elias at a careful distance, her eyes constantly scanning for danger, and yet she found herself more focused on him than on the environment. She had never seen anyone move like this human. Every step he took, every decision he made, displayed an awareness that seemed almost unnatural. Zira adjusted her visor to zoom in on his movements. Elias did not rush. He didn't panic when small rocks tumbled beneath his feet, nor did he flinch when shadows shifted as the suns dipped lower. Instead, he adapted. Every instinct, every reflex was precise, calculated, and confident. Zira's tail flicked nervously. She had trained to anticipate every action of other species. Her experience had taught her to predict the patterns of hunters, scouts, and even rival soldiers. But this human defied all prediction. He did not follow patterns. He created them in real time, responding to the environment with creativity and intelligence. As they walked, Elias paused near a narrow ridge overlooking a deep chasm. The wind whistled sharply, carrying loose stones over the edge. Zira crouched behind a rock, observing. The human did not hesitate. He stepped forward carefully, testing the edges with his foot. The stones shifted, threatening to give way, but he adjusted his balance instinctively. He moved along the ridge as if it were solid ground, each step confident, each movement precise. Zira's mind raced. Humans were supposed to be weaker, less coordinated, more fragile than most alien species. Yet Elias was doing something no alien scout could achieve without advanced technology. His movements were simple, but perfect. Suddenly, a section of rock crumbled beneath him. Zira gasped, expecting disaster. But Elias reacted instantly. He jumped to the side, landing on a narrow ledge with steady feet. His breathing remained calm, his eyes scanning the terrain ahead. She realized then that his survival was not accidental. He anticipated danger before it arrived, sensing hazards in ways her technology could not measure. Zira felt something unfamiliar. Admiration. She had trained to dominate, to capture, to study, but she had never admired a human before. There was something about his presence, calm, intelligent, fearless, that unsettled her and yet fascinated her at the same time. They continued along a winding path that led into a dense canyon. The walls were high, jagged, and covered in alien vegetation that swayed with the wind. Zira noticed that Elias slowed near patches of plants with sharp leaves, avoiding them carefully. The canyon was riddled with natural hazards, hidden pits, falling rocks, and sudden drops. Most creatures would stumble or panic. Not him. Elias crouched, examining a faint mark in the soil. He traced it with his finger, reading the patterns left by small creatures that had passed through earlier. Zira's sensors confirmed her observation. He could perceive things no alien could detect, sensing the presence of life through subtle cues. He was reading the world around him in a way that was almost like communication with it. "Remarkable," Zira whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "A human, capable of understanding the environment at this level." She activated a small, hovering drone to follow him more closely. The drone's sensors recorded every movement, every micro-reaction, but even her instruments struggled to keep up. Elias moved with a combination of awareness and instinct that no algorithm could fully analyze. The canyon narrowed further, and the path became treacherous. Loose rocks, sharp ledges, and sudden drops made progress difficult. Zira had anticipated that he might falter here, but he did not. He moved with deliberate care, testing the ground, adjusting his balance, and choosing paths that no alien scout would dare take. At one point, a small rock slide occurred, triggered by the wind and the unstable terrain. Zira expected Elias to stumble, or worse. Instead, he leapt to safety, using a low wall as a pivot and landing perfectly on a flat surface. She could see the determination in his eyes, the calm focus that allowed him to navigate danger without panic. Zira realized something important. Humans were not only clever, but adaptable. They could survive not because they were stronger or faster than aliens, but because they could think differently. They could anticipate danger in ways that relied on intuition, observation, and rapid adaptation rather than brute strength. For the first time, she questioned her mission. She had been sent to capture this human, to prove the superiority of her species. Now, she found herself fascinated by him, curious about how he could do what no alien could. She wanted to follow him, not to capture him, but to learn from him. The canyon opened into a large valley. Strange plants glowed faintly in the dim light of the setting suns. The ground was uneven, scattered with rocks and small pools of water. Elias walked through the valley as if he had done it 100 times, though Zira knew this was impossible. Every step was precise, avoiding hidden dangers and hazards that no alien might notice until it was too late. Zira crouched behind a rock, observing him closely. He paused near a shallow pool, kneeling to examine a subtle ripple in the water. He moved one hand through it carefully, testing the depth and observing the reflection of the light above. Even something as simple as a pool of water became a tool for observation and understanding in his hands. She could not help but feel respect for him. Her species valued strength, endurance, and technical skill. But Elias demonstrated that intelligence, observation, and adaptability were equally, if not more, powerful. Humans could survive where her scouts had failed, not because of physical strength, but because of ingenuity. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the valley. The ground shook slightly, sending small rocks tumbling. Zira's sensors detected a minor quake, enough to trigger danger in the uneven terrain. She expected Elias to panic or falter, but he did not. He adjusted instantly, shifting his weight and stepping carefully. The ground cracked beneath him, but he leapt over it effortlessly, landing without losing balance. She realized that humans did not just react to danger, they anticipated it, calculated the risk, and moved accordingly. Zira's admiration grew. She had been trained to dominate, to overcome, and to capture. But she had never seen an opponent who could teach her something about awareness and courage. This human was not just surviving. He was demonstrating qualities that made her rethink everything she believed about humans. As they continued through the valley, Zira followed more closely. She wanted to test him further, to see how far his abilities extended. She activated a small set of sensors to create a simulated hazard, a small energy barrier designed to detect movement. She expected him to trigger it, but he did not. He moved around it, stepping carefully and avoiding detection entirely. Her mind raced. How could a human navigate hazards designed to detect every possible action? How could he survive without panic, without mistakes? She realized that humans were not predictable. They were inventive, adaptive, and capable of learning in real time. Zira finally stepped out from her hiding place completely, approaching him openly. Elias turned his head, meeting her gaze. He smiled slightly, calm and unafraid. "You're following me," he said, his voice steady. "I am observing," Zira replied. "I need to understand how you move through danger unharmed. Your abilities, they defy everything we know about humans." Elias nodded. "We survive by observing, by adapting, by moving carefully. It is not impossible. It is attention, awareness, and understanding." Zira considered his words. She realized that she had been trained to anticipate predictable behavior, to capture what was weaker or less intelligent. But humans were different. They survived because they could think differently, react differently, and understand their surroundings in ways no alien could anticipate. The valley stretched before them, filled with strange terrain and unknown challenges. Zira knew that following him would not be easy, but she was determined. She wanted to see how far a human could go, how far ingenuity and courage could take someone against impossible odds. And as the suns dipped below the horizon, painting the valley in shades of orange and purple, Zira realized the truth. This human was extraordinary. Not because of strength, not because of weapons, not because of technology, but because of his mind, his instincts, and his courage. The journey ahead would be dangerous. The planet held challenges that no one had survived before. But Zira knew one thing. If anyone could face them and succeed, it was him. She followed him into the dim light, ready to learn, ready to observe, and ready to witness something remarkable. Humans were not fragile. Humans were incredible. And Zira, for the first time in her life, wanted to understand why. The valley ahead grew darker as the twin suns of Voron 6 dipped below the horizon. Shadows stretched long across the jagged rocks, and the wind whispered through the strange alien vegetation. Captain Elias walked steadily, every step deliberate, while Lieutenant Zira followed at a careful distance. For hours, Zira had observed him. She had watched as he avoided hidden hazards, navigated narrow ridges, and interpreted the smallest clues the planet offered. But now, for the first time, the terrain presented a challenge that even Elias had to consider carefully. The valley opened into a wide plain, dotted with jagged pillars of rock. Strange luminescent plants glowed faintly, and the ground shifted slightly underfoot. It was beautiful, but dangerous. Sensors hidden beneath the soil detected subtle vibrations, small but significant tremors. The entire area was unstable. A wrong step could trigger a collapse. Elias crouched, studying the ground. His eyes narrowed as he measured distances, observed cracks in the rocks, and felt the subtle tremors through his feet. He moved slowly, deliberately, each step testing the stability of the terrain. Zira watched in awe. He was calm, yet fully aware of the danger surrounding him. Suddenly, a section of the ground gave way. Rocks tumbled down a steep slope, creating a minor landslide. Elias reacted immediately, leaping to a safe position and extending a hand to steady himself. The ground beneath him shifted again, but he adjusted instantly, balancing perfectly. Zira realized that humans survived not because they were stronger, but because they could read danger instinctively and react in ways no alien could predict. Zira stepped closer. She needed to understand him, not just observe him. "Human," she called, her voice cautious. "How do you move through this world so unharmed?" Elias looked at her, his expression calm. "I watch. I adapt. I listen. The world gives clues if you know how to pay attention." Zira considered his words carefully. Her species relied on technology, weapons, and calculations. Humans relied on awareness, instinct, and cleverness. She had been trained to dominate opponents with force or strategy, but this human used intelligence differently, fluid, adaptable, almost alive with the environment itself. "Then you trust your instincts," she said quietly. "Always," Elias replied. "Observation is only useful if you act on it correctly." The conversation surprised Zira. No human had ever spoken to her this way before, confident, calm, and without fear. Most humans were cautious, but Elias exuded an air of certainty. His bravery was not reckless, it was calculated and deliberate. As they moved forward, the ground shook more violently. The small tremors escalated into minor quakes, sending rocks tumbling and dust swirling through the valley. Hidden fissures opened in the ground, and jagged pillars threatened to collapse at any moment. The terrain, which had been challenging, had become hazardous. Elias paused, crouching low to examine a large crack in the ground. He tested it carefully with a rock. noting the angle of the fissure and the stability of the surrounding soil. Zira followed his movements closely, curious about his methods. He was not only surviving, he was thinking ahead, predicting the dangers before they fully appeared. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the valley. A massive pillar of rock shifted dangerously, blocking their path forward. Elias assessed the situation quickly. He noticed a narrow gap to the side, partially hidden by glowing vegetation. Carefully, he led the way, stepping lightly, testing each stone before moving on. Zira hesitated for a moment. This was dangerous. The pillar could collapse at any moment. But Elias moved confidently, showing no sign of fear. She realized that humans had a unique ability to assess risk in ways that went beyond calculation. They could combine instinct, observation, and experience to survive where others would fail. She decided to follow him more closely. She realized that their journey had changed. She had come to observe, to learn, but now she faced a choice: continue as a hunter or become something different, something unexpected. As they moved together, a loud rumble shook the valley. A section of ground ahead split open, revealing a deep chasm. Beyond it, the path continued, but the gap was wide and dangerous. Elias assessed the situation. He looked around for alternative routes, testing rocks and estimating distances. Zira realized he could jump the gap, but even with his skills, it was risky. She watched as he crouched, focusing his strength and balance. Then, with a single, controlled leap, he cleared the chasm perfectly, landing lightly on the other side. Zira's tail twitched. She had been trained to overcome obstacles, but humans like Elias moved differently. They did not rely solely on strength. They relied on careful observation, courage, and precise timing. He had survived countless dangers by reading the environment and reacting with intelligence. For the first time, Zira felt something unusual: respect for a human. She had been trained to see humans as fragile, predictable, and weak. Yet here was one who defied every expectation, moving through impossible terrain with calm confidence. "Lieutenant Zira," Elias said, turning toward her, "the path ahead is unstable. You should proceed carefully." Zira nodded slowly. She had followed him long enough to know he was right. Together they moved forward, stepping lightly and carefully. The terrain was treacherous, but they complemented each other. Elias observed and adapted. Zira scanned and calculated. Neither one faltered. As the evening deepened, they reached a narrow gorge. The walls were steep, the path slippery with loose rocks. Small pools of water reflected the dim light of the moons rising above. Elias paused, crouching to examine the rocks. Zira watched as he tested each foothold, moving with care. Suddenly, a loud rumble echoed from above. A section of rock broke free, tumbling toward them. Elias reacted instantly, pushing Zira to the side and leaping himself. The rocks crashed to the ground, narrowly missing them. Zira's heart raced. She had never expected to experience this level of danger and survival so closely. Humans, she realized, were not only clever but also courageous in ways that her species could hardly comprehend. "Thank you," she said quietly, once the rocks settled. Elias nodded. "We survive together when needed. Awareness and cooperation matter more than strength alone." For the first time, Zira understood something vital. This human was not just exceptional. He represented a way of thinking, a method of survival that her species had never considered. Observing, adapting, and cooperating were tools as powerful as weapons or traps. The gorge narrowed further, forming a natural corridor between towering cliffs. The wind howled and small stones tumbled down the sides. Elias moved forward, leading with careful steps. Zira followed, her eyes scanning for hidden hazards. She realized that she had grown to trust him, to rely on his instincts, even as she had once planned to capture him. Finally, they reached a plateau, overlooking a wide expanse. The valley below stretched endlessly, dotted with alien flora and rocky ridges. In the distance, Zira could see faint signs of activity, glimmers of energy, possibly automated defense systems or natural hazards she could not yet detect. Elias turned to her, calm and steady. "The next section will be dangerous," he said. "We will need to work together to navigate it safely." Zira nodded. She realized that she had crossed a threshold. She was no longer merely an observer. She was now an ally, working alongside a human whose abilities she could not ignore. As night fell over Voron 6, the two moved forward together. The journey had shifted from a pursuit to a partnership. Each step, each movement, required awareness, trust, and cooperation. The planet tested them, challenging their skills and instincts. But together, they advanced, stronger than they could be alone. Zira finally understood a truth she had never considered. Humans were not fragile, and they were not predictable. They were clever, resourceful, and brave. And when they worked together with others, even those from another species, they could overcome challenges that seemed impossible. The wind whispered through the valley, carrying with it the promise of danger, adventure, and discovery. Elias and Zira stood side by side, ready to face whatever the planet had in store. She had never imagined she would respect a human this way, let alone rely on one. But now, there was no doubt. The journey continued, and for the first time, Zira felt a sense of hope. Together, they could survive anything. Humans, she realized, were extraordinary. And she was witnessing it firsthand. The valley stretched endlessly before them, a maze of jagged rocks, glowing plants, and shifting terrain. Captain Elias and Lieutenant Zira moved cautiously but confidently, each step deliberate, each glance measured. The dangers of Voron 6 were still very real. Small tremors shook the ground, unstable cliffs loomed above, and hidden energy fields hummed faintly beneath the soil. Yet, for the first time, Zira felt a strange sense of calm. She had come to this planet expecting to capture a human intruder. Instead, she had found a partner. "The main facility should be just beyond the ridge," Elias said quietly, his voice steady. "If we can reach it, we can prevent the systems from collapsing." Zira adjusted her visor and scanned the horizon. The facility appeared as a cluster of sleek towers, glowing faintly with alien energy. Normally, approaching it would be dangerous. Automated defenses, security drones, and environmental hazards would have made the trek nearly impossible. But Elias moved with confidence, reading the terrain, predicting dangers, and adapting as he went. Zira realized that her training and experience as a scout, while valuable, could not match the combination of awareness and adaptability that the human displayed. She had learned much from him already, but now the stakes had risen. If they failed to reach the facility in time, the planet itself could suffer catastrophic damage. They approached the ridge, the ground uneven beneath their feet. A low hum resonated through the soil, a warning of underground instability. Zira slowed, moving carefully, but Elias continued forward with steady steps. He paused briefly to examine a section of rock, testing its stability before stepping across. She followed his lead, trusting his judgment. Suddenly, a section of the ridge collapsed. Rocks tumbled down the steep sides, creating a miniature landslide. Zira instinctively leaped to the side, but Elias's reaction was immediate. He extended a hand, signaling her to follow, and then crossed the unstable section in a single fluid movement. She mirrored him, landing safely beside him. "Humans are remarkable," Zira said, exhaling with a mix of relief and admiration. Elias smiled faintly. "It's not just humans. It's attention, observation, and trust. You are learning, too." Zira considered his words. They were no longer simply scout and intruder. They were partners. Cooperation, she realized. could overcome challenges that force alone could not. The facility loomed ahead, its towers glowing with soft blue light. The outer defenses were still active, but Elias had already analyzed the layout. Hidden laser grids, automated turrets, and energy barriers were all present, but he had a plan. He moved carefully, observing each hazard, calculating the safest path forward. Zira followed, contributing her own knowledge of alien technology and scanning for unseen dangers. As they advanced, a section of the ground beneath them trembled violently. A fissure opened unexpectedly, threatening to block their path. Zira hesitated, but Elias moved instinctively, leaping across the gap and landing firmly on the other side. He extended a hand to help her, and together they crossed safely. "You adapt quickly," Elias said, his calm voice carrying a tone of respect. Zira nodded. "I am learning from you. Humans, they survive in ways I never understood." He smiled faintly. "And you are understanding it now." The facility entrance came into view, partially blocked by fallen debris and unstable platforms. Automated defense systems hummed as if sensing intruders. Zira scanned for energy signatures and calculated the safest route. Elias crouched low, moving ahead first, stepping carefully and testing each surface. She followed, matching his careful rhythm. Inside the facility, the situation grew more urgent. Systems were failing, and warning lights blinked across consoles. Energy surges rippled through the floors and walls, threatening to overload the entire structure. Elias moved quickly, reading the control panels, understanding the technology, and identifying the source of the instability. Zira observed, amazed at his speed of understanding. Humans could read situations and adapt almost instantly, making decisions that even advanced alien systems might not anticipate. A section of the floor gave way suddenly, sending sparks flying and creating a dangerous gap. Elias leaped across it, landing safely and signaling Zira to follow. She mirrored his movements, carefully balancing as she crossed. The facility's alarms echoed through the halls, but Elias remained calm. He analyzed the systems, determining which controls to adjust to prevent further failures. Zira watched in awe. Her species had relied on technology, precision, and experience to maintain control. Humans, she realized, relied on awareness, intelligence, and adaptability. In this moment, she understood that these qualities were equally powerful, if not more so. "Here," Elias said, pointing to a control panel. "We need to stabilize the energy core. If we don't, the facility could collapse entirely." Zira nodded. "I will assist you. Together we can manage it." Working side by side, they moved quickly. Elias adjusted controls with careful hands, observing the flow of energy and anticipating potential overloads. Zira provided scans, rerouting power, and monitoring structural integrity. Their combined efforts created a rhythm, a balance of human intuition and alien precision. The energy core began to stabilize. Sparks dimmed, alarms quieted, and the facility's systems returned to normal operation. Zira exhaled, feeling a sense of relief she had never experienced on a mission before. She turned to Elias, her eyes reflecting newfound respect. "You are extraordinary," she said. "Humans, they survive against impossible odds using intelligence and courage. I understand now." Elias smiled faintly. "It is not just humans. It is awareness, adaptability, and trust. You have learned it too." Zira realized he was right. She had learned something invaluable, that cooperation, observation, and courage could overcome challenges far greater than either could face alone. Her mission had changed. She no longer sought to capture or judge the human. She had witnessed something extraordinary, the essence of what made humans remarkable. As they exited the control room, Zira looked around the facility. Systems hummed steadily, and energy flowed smoothly through the halls. The danger had passed. and the facility was safe. She felt a sense of pride, not in her species alone, but in the shared achievement of overcoming impossible odds together. Elias walked beside her, calm and steady. "The planet is safe. For now," he said. "But there are always challenges ahead. Awareness and courage will always be needed." Zira nodded. "And humans, they embody both. I have never seen a species like this. I understand why they survive when others fail." Together, they stepped outside the facility. The twin moons of Voron 6 had risen, casting pale light across the landscape. The jagged cliffs and glowing plants looked beautiful in the soft light, but danger still lingered in hidden crevices and unstable ground. Yet Zira no longer feared it. She had learned that courage, intelligence, and cooperation could overcome even the deadliest challenges. Elias looked at her. "You have learned quickly. You see now that strength alone is not enough. Observation, adaptability, and courage matter more." Zira smiled faintly. "I see it now. Humans, they are extraordinary, and I have witnessed it firsthand." The human captain had walked through impossible dangers, navigated traps, and solved challenges that no alien could. He had not relied solely on strength, technology, or force. He had relied on intelligence, adaptability, and courage. And in doing so, he had shown Zira the true power of his species. The facility behind them hummed steadily, and the planet seemed calm once more. Zira realized that her perspective had changed completely. Humans were not fragile. Humans were not weak. They were remarkable. And she had seen it all with her own eyes. Elias turned toward his ship, preparing to depart. Zira stood beside him, watching as he moved with calm confidence. She knew that the story of this human would be remembered, not for his strength alone, but for his courage, intelligence, and adaptability. "You have shown me something extraordinary," Zira said quietly. "Humans survive against impossible odds, and they teach others to adapt as well." Elias smiled faintly. "And you have learned to see it. That is all anyone can ask for." As the ship lifted into the sky, Zira watched it disappear into the distance. She knew that this encounter had changed her forever. She had witnessed human ingenuity, courage, and adaptability in its purest form. She had learned that survival was not about force alone. It was about awareness, intelligence, and the courage to face impossible challenges. The twin moons reflected off her visor as she turned back toward the valley. The planet was quiet, the danger past, and a new understanding had taken root in her mind. Humans were extraordinary. They survived where others would fail. They adapted when others would panic. They faced impossible odds, and they triumphed. And Zira had been there to see it. The story of the human who walked through the trap unharmed would be remembered across the galaxy. Not because he was invincible, but because he embodied the qualities that made his species remarkable: courage, intelligence, and the power to adapt in the face of impossible danger. Zira smiled softly to herself, knowing that she had witnessed something extraordinary. Humanity, she realized, was not just a species. It was a force to be respected, admired, and learned from. And in that moment, she understood the truth. Humans could triumph against any challenge, not because they were the strongest, but because they were clever, brave, and adaptable. The galaxy had never truly understood humans, but Zira had seen them, and she would never forget.